Hey there, tonight we're not walking on two legs, we're stepping into a different set of hooves. Because this isn't a story about knights and glory, this isn't about tournaments or noble steeds, this is about what it actually meant to be a horse in the Middle Ages. Not a symbol, not a hero, a tool, a target, a beast. And the truth? It sucked. Bad hay, heavy armour, endless war, no rest, no mercy. If you think humans had it hard back then, imagine carrying them. So for the next while, we're walking through 20 brutal reasons why the medieval world was a nightmare for horses. No sugarcoating, just mud, pain, hunger, and noise. If this kind of slow, immersive storytelling helps you wind down or makes you see history from a new angle, feel free to like the video and subscribe. And if you're still awake by the end, let me know in the comments. Where are you listening from? And what time is it right now? There's something strangely comforting about knowing people all across the world are falling asleep to the same quiet history. So breathe deep, get still, and let's begin. You're not born into a herd, you're born into ownership. From your first breath, you're not just a foal, you're an investment. A future mount, a cart puller, a dowry add-on, a gamble at a market. That's the first brutal truth. You don't belong to yourself. You never will. The second you stand, wobbly-legged, still dripping, your mother nosing at your side, hands are already on you, checking your legs, your back, your temperament. Are you going to be docile? Are you built for pulling? Will you tolerate iron on your feet and weight on your spine? If not, you're trouble, or meat. There's no childhood in the way we'd understand it. No long seasons of free roaming. No wild gallops through open pastures. You're fenced, tethered, tied to routines and ropes. You're fed just enough to grow straight, not soft. If you get sick, herbs. Maybe. If you're lucky, you're not trained with kindness, you're trained with noise, pain, and repetition. Ropes tighten, bits dig in, hooves abound. If you rear or shy, you're beaten. If you stand still, you're not punished. That's the deal. And it's not because anyone is cruel. It's because you're not seen as alive in the way humans are. You're a thing, a tool with ears, a body that walks before wheels, hauls before carts, and dies before its owner. A poor peasant might love their ox like family, might weep when it falls. But a horse is luxury, a weapon, a tax. You're fed when there's hay. When there's none, you chew bark, or straw, or whatever your teeth can tear from dry ground. Water's rationed, warmth is rare, shelter is thin, and still, your worth rises. Not because you're healthy, because you're useful. You're inspected, not admired, groomed, but only to look better when you're sold. Named, maybe, but it'll change with your owner. You get used to it. Because your name, your coat, your age, it's all just entries on someone else's ledger. You don't get to grow old. You get to be traded, worked, broken. You are alive. But you are not free. You don't understand war. You don't understand flags or sides or why the man on your back is screaming. But you run anyway. Because someone kicks your ribs, pulls your mouth with iron, shouts in a language you'll never learn. And if you don't run, you'll be punished harder than any sword could cut. This is the second brutal truth. You go to war before you understand what pain really is. You don't charge because you're brave. You charge because the bit tears your mouth until blood runs down your throat. Because if you stop, your legs will be cut from under you. Because you've been trained not with kindness, but with repetition and fear to move when told. And when you run, everything around you screams. Arrows snap through the air, drums pound, smoke chokes your breath, and all the other horses are just as panicked as you are. It's not a formation, it's a storm of muscle and steel and fear. You trample things, sometimes people, sometimes other horses that went down just seconds before you reached them. There's no room to dodge, no time to mourn. You run over the fallen like you were trained to, and if you fall, no one picks you up. You break a leg, and that's the end. Not slowly, not mercifully. a sword, a spear, or just left to bleed out under the feet of the next wave. You are armor without a voice, a shield with lungs, and when your rider is thrown, if he lives, he runs. If you live, you're sold again, or pressed into another battle, or traded to haul carts, broken but not dead enough. And if you die, there is no grave, no marker, just blood in the dirt, and another horse taking your place by morning. You didn't ask for war, but war uses you first. It's not a question of diet, it's a question of survival, because in the Middle Ages, grain is for people, hay is for cattle, and whatever's left, that's for you. That's the third brutal truth. You eat last, and you eat worst. If there's a drought, you suffer first. If winter comes early, you chew mouldy straw. If there's a war and the village is burned, your feed is ash, roots, or nothing at all. You were born to run, to carry, to pull, to fight, but you're fed like a burden. The hay is coarse, filled with dust, burrs, sometimes thorns. It scrapes your mouth, chokes your throat. Your teeth grind it slowly, endlessly, until you've got nothing left but fatigue in your jaw and a belly still half empty. Sometimes you get grain, if you're a warhorse, or a noble's mount. But even then it's measured in handfuls, oats soaked in vinegar, or mashed with herbs to hide rot. You eat it gladly, because you remember what hunger does to your legs, and water. Cold, dirty, full of algae. In winter, it freezes over. In summer, it vanishes. If you're lucky, a boy will lead you to a stream once a day. If you're not, you'll lick mud until your tongue cracks. You eat bark, weeds, rope ends. If a cart breaks and the yoke has leather, you chew it, just to taste something alive. And if you refuse to eat, you're sick. And sick horses don't last long. No one calls the vet, no one waits it out. If you're valuable, you get a poultice, maybe a bleeding. Maybe some dried herb ground into a mash and shoved down your throat with a stick. If you're not, they'll try to sell you before it shows. Or keep whipping until you move again. Or not feed you at all. If you die, at least you won't cost them another meal. You were never meant to feast. You were meant to endure. And that means chewing whatever's left, even if it tastes like dust and swallows like rope. You dream of lying down, not for long, just enough to let your legs stop trembling, to feel the dirt against your ribs, to fold your body the way animals are supposed to when they rest. But in the Middle Ages you sleep standing. That's the fourth brutal truth. Rest isn't real. It's just a pause between pain. Your legs lock, not by choice but by instinct. It's the only way to avoid collapse. The ground is cold, hard, full of dung and old straw. There are rats sometimes, and always the sound of coughing, creaking wood, chains pulling, hooves pacing nearby. If you lie down and can't get up, they'll say you're lame, sick, broken, and broken horses aren't fixed. They're replaced, so you stay upright, even when you're exhausted, even when your knees wobble, even when your head droops and your neck sways like a branch in the wind. No one wakes you gently. They throw open the stable door before dawn. They slap your flank, yank the rope, shout commands you've learned to obey because you've felt what happens when you don't. You're already harnessed before the sky is blue. Already pulling, already stepping, already sweating. There's no soft bed, no hay mattress, no brushing unless it's for show. And when the workday ends, if it ends, you're tethered tight, sometimes without shade, sometimes without cover, sometimes without water. You don't lie down then either. It's not worth the risk. You shift your weight from one hoof to the other. You blink slow. You let the flies bite. You wait for the dark, knowing that even sleep doesn't give you peace, only the absence of motion. But even in those moments, you don't let yourself fall, because out here, if you lie down, you might never get up again. You hear the hammer before you see it, rhythmic, sharp, metal on metal, a sound that freezes you in place, because you know what it means. It's time for the farrier. The fifth brutal truth. Your feet never stop hurting. You don't get to run barefoot in meadows. You don't feel soft earth under your hooves. You walk on stone, mud, frozen ruts, fields trampled into raw, uneven scars. And to survive it, they drive iron into your feet. They call it shoeing, like it's polite, like it's something done for you. But you remember what it felt like the first time. They raised your leg too high, tied it tight. They rasped your hoof, cut it back until it was raw. You kicked, screamed. They bound your head, twisted your ears, shouted until you couldn't fight anymore. Then came the nails, not into your skin, into your hoof. You learn that your hoof is insensitive. That's the word they use. As if it doesn't matter that the pressure feels wrong, that sometimes they miss, that sometimes the hoof cracks anyway. They don't use painkillers. There's no soft word or slow hand. It's fast, loud, smelling of smoke and hot metal. If you're lucky, the farrier is skilled. If not, you limp for days, maybe weeks, and no one cares. As long as you can still walk, still work, you're fine. Shoes are supposed to protect you, but sometimes they're too tight. Sometimes the nails split the hoof. Sometimes a shoe falls off mid-journey and no one notices until you've worn the exposed edge down to pulp. There's no rest, no days off to heal. You're a horse, you walk, that's your job. Even when it feels like stepping on fire, even when you can feel the nail's wrongness with every step. You don't complain, because you can't. And if you stumble, the whip reminds you, keep moving. You're not built for this, not for the weight, not for the angle, not for the endless press of burden behind you. But they don't care, because the sixth brutal reason is simple. You pull until something breaks, and it's never the cart. The harness digs into your shoulders. The yoke rubs your neck raw. The straps are old, cracked, made from leather that once belonged to something like you. If they tighten too much, you choke. If they're too loose, you're beaten for tripping. The load is never fair, it's not measured, it's guessed, and the guess is always too much. You're not pulling on smooth roads, you're dragging on mud, on ruts, on ice, over rocks, through streams, and when the cart sticks, you don't get help, you get a shout, a whip, a curse, maybe two men behind you pushing, maybe not. If you hesitate, you feel it, not on your back, on your soul. The whip doesn't land in the same place twice. It doesn't need to. Pain spreads, motivation burns, and so you lean harder, you strain, you dig in, you learn to throw your entire weight forward like a weapon, like a prayer. Your knees tremble, your breath frosts in the morning air. You don't know what day it is, only that you're halfway to collapse and still expected to move. And when you falter, because every horse falters, your name is cursed. Your reins are yanked, and if you're in a team, the other horses are forced to drag your weight and theirs. They hate you for it. They don't understand why you stopped. Neither do you. Your legs are bleeding, your joints scream, your mouth is torn, and still you're blamed. Not because you failed, but because you dared to stop pulling. There's no loyalty, no lifelong bond, no gentle retirement at the edge of a green field. Because the seventh brutal truth is this: you are always for sale. It doesn't matter how long you've served, how many winters you've survived, how many fields you've ploughed, wagons you've hauled, or miles you've marched. When food runs short, when coins grow thin, when taxes come due, you're not part of the family. You're inventory. You get walked to market before sunrise, pulled by rope. Not led, dragged. You don't know where you're going, only that the ground smells unfamiliar and the hands are strangers. Men prod your ribs, lift your lips to inspect your teeth, slap your flanks, ask if you've ever thrown a shoe, ask if you kick. Your owner lies. Of course he does. Because you don't just cost money. You are money. They argue over your price like you're a sack of oats. One man wants you for pulling, another for breeding, another just wants something big and strong enough to carry wood through the forest and maybe survive the bandits. No one asks if your back still aches. No one cares that your left eye doesn't see well anymore. You're sold, resold, passed between hands like a coin worn smooth. Each time you learn a new voice, a new whip, a new name, if they bother giving you one. Most just call you horse, or that one, or nothing at all. And when you finally collapse in a field one spring, ribs showing, knees trembling, mouth foaming from work done too long and too hard, they don't bury you. They strip the saddle, maybe the shoes, maybe the meat, if they're hungry enough. Then they move on. They'll remember you only long enough to say, "We need another one," because you weren't a companion. You were a cost, and no one mourns what they already plan to replace. You didn't cough, you didn't bleed, but they still feared you, because the eighth brutal truth is this: you carry death without knowing it. You didn't get sick like the humans did. Not always, not visibly. But you moved through villages where death clung to the air like fog, and when people started to die, they looked at everything that moved, and you were always moving. You pulled carts of goods through plague towns, then pulled different carts of corpses back out. You were covered in their linen, their blankets, their blood. They didn't clean your harness, they didn't wash your coat. And the next place you went, you carried the sickness there too, on hooves, on hide, on the wheel tracks in the dirt. You weren't blamed like the rats, but you weren't trusted either. If a horse walked into a clean village and someone got sick 2 days later, they remembered. Some believed horses had the devil in them, that your eyes glowed too much, that your whinny summoned the dead. They tied bells to your harness, not to be festive, but to warn. Here comes a horse that's been too many places. Here comes something that might carry bad air in its mane, or pestilence on its back. You were the messenger of death, and sometimes that meant you were driven off, not sold, banished, walked to the edge of the forest and turned loose, chased with rocks if you tried to follow, not out of cruelty, out of fear. You'd stand there confused, hungry, trained to work but with no more orders to follow. You'd wait, and eventually a wolf would find you, or cold would take you, or you'd return to a different village and the whole thing would start again. Because to them, you weren't just a beast of burden. You were a shadow, a silent reminder that the sickness had legs and hooves, and a heartbeat. No one asks if you're ready. You're broken in, not gently, not with patience, but with ropes, noise, pain, and repetition. Over and over, until you stop resisting. That's the ninth brutal truth. You're not taught. You're forced into obedience. It starts early. You're barely old enough to walk without stumbling when the halters slipped over your head. You buck, you pull, you panic, but the rope is always stronger. You learn that resistance means pain, that calm means less of it. You're not rewarded with kindness, just the absence of punishment. If you flinch, they raise their hand. If you shy away from a noise, you're yanked forward. If you kick, they strike harder. Not to harm, just to correct. You don't forget those first lessons. The bit is shoved into your mouth until your gums bleed. The saddle is cinched tight until your ribs feel like they'll cave in. You buck once, maybe twice, but the whip comes faster than you can twist. So you stop. You don't learn to love your rider. You learn to anticipate their anger. Voices become triggers. Hands mean pain, even calm ones. You never know when the slap is coming, only that it will. Not always for doing something wrong, but sometimes just for being too slow. They call it breaking for a reason. You're not wild after that. You're quiet. Still. Predictable. They say you're trained, but really you're just afraid. And that fear stays with you in every ride, every pull, every time someone new takes your reins and you freeze, not knowing if they'll be cruel or simply careless. It's not trust that keeps you in line, it's survival. You don't understand enemies. You don't know flags or kings or crests painted on shields. You can't read the colours that say who you're supposed to trample, who you're supposed to fear. But you're thrown into battle anyway, and you charge into death for men who will never say your name. That's the 11th brutal truth. You fight wars you don't understand, and no one remembers you when they're done. You don't know why the man on your back shouts louder today, why the drum beats are faster, why the other horses are covered in armour and foam. But when they all begin to run, you run too, because not running means punishment. Not running means pain. The sounds are deafening. You hear the clash of metal before you see the wall of pikes. You hear screaming men, snorting horses, war cries, and the deep bellow of horns. The ground shakes under your hooves, not from fear, but from thousands of other hooves, driven like yours by pain and force and fear. And then comes the clash. The impact feels like running into a wall made of bones and steel. You don't have time to react. Your head jerks back. Your ribs twist beneath your rider's weight. You fall into other horses, some wounded, some dead, some still galloping with broken legs and blood in their eyes. You can't retreat. There's no room to turn around. The soldiers behind you push forward, screaming for glory, pressing you deeper into the chaos. You step on people, on armor, on the dead. You don't want to, but they're already there. You're shoved toward more shouting, more swinging steel, more fire. Something explodes near your left side. You rear. You can't breathe. Something cuts across your neck. You don't even see it. You stumble. If you fall, no one lifts you. No one tends your wounds. You're not pulled to safety like the knight who rode you. He rolls free, grabs another mount, maybe one of your kin, and rides again. You are left to panic, to bleed, to trample in place until your legs give out and you collapse under the weight of your own body. If you live through it, they patch you up with rope and rags and send you out again. No rest, no healing. Just another fight, another load, another death you have to run beside. And if you die, you are part of the pile. One more mound of torn leather and stiff limbs baking in the sun after the trumpets have stopped and the stories are already being told. But none of those stories include you, because horses don't get glory. They get used and forgotten. There's a road in front of you. You don't know where it leads, but you walk it anyway. That's the 13th brutal truth. You go where they say, carry what they load, and never once get asked if you're able. You're a beast of burden. That's the title. It sounds almost noble, like something ancient, something honourable. But all it means is this. You move for them. Wherever, whenever, however. No questions, no hesitation, no rest unless they decide you've earned it. The weight is constant. Barrels, sacks, stones, piles of wood taller than your back. Peasants load you with their livelihood. Grain, beer, cheese, ropes, bones, charcoal. Sometimes people too. Sometimes bodies. They balance it unevenly. One side heavier than the other. One corner digging into your ribs. A rope too tight on your neck or too loose so it drags under your hooves. You can feel the load shift with every step, but you keep walking. Because if you stumble, they shout. If you falter, they whip. If you stop completely, they say you're stubborn. And stubborn horses don't last long. The path changes, but your role doesn't. You cross rivers so deep you can't breathe. Trudge through mud so thick your hooves stick like stone. Climb hills so steep your knees shake while they ride you, spurs biting into your sides, reins jerking your head every time you hesitate. Sometimes you carry a family's only hope, sometimes just one man's pride. Sometimes stolen goods, knowing nothing of what's tied to your back, except that it gets heavier. with every mile. You don't ask where you're going, because it doesn't matter. Your journey is theirs. Your strength is theirs. Your suffering is silent. When night falls, you don't choose where to stop. They tie you to a post, or a tree, or nothing at all. Maybe they throw you a handful of hay. Maybe not. You eat what you can reach. You sleep standing again. Then the road begins again. Different direction. New town. Same burden. You exist only to bring them farther, and no one ever wonders how far you wanted to go. You don't understand enemies. You don't know flags or kings or crests painted on shields. You can't read the colours that say who you're supposed to trample, who you're supposed to fear. But you're thrown into battle anyway, and you charge into death for men who will never say your name. That's the 11th brutal truth. You fight wars you don't understand, and no one remembers you when they're done. You don't know why the man on your back shouts louder today, why the drum beats are faster, why the other horses are covered in armour and foam. But when they all begin to run, you run too, because not running means punishment. Not running means pain. The sounds are deafening. You hear the clash of metal before you see the wall of pikes. You hear screaming men, snorting horses, war cries, and the deep bellow of horns. The ground shakes under your hooves, not from fear, but from thousands of other hooves, driven like yours by pain and force and fear. And then comes the clash. The impact feels like running into a wall made of bones and steel. You don't have time to react. Your head jerks back. Your ribs twist beneath your rider's weight. You fall into other horses, some wounded, some dead, some still galloping with broken legs and blood in their eyes. You can't retreat. There's no room to turn around. The soldiers behind you push forward, screaming for glory, pressing you deeper into the chaos. You step on people, on armor, on the dead. You don't want to, but they're already there. You're shoved toward more shouting, more swinging steel, more fire. Something explodes near your left side. You rear. You can't breathe. Something cuts across your neck. You don't even see it. You stumble. If you fall, no one lifts you. No one tends your wounds. You are not pulled to safety like the knight who rode you. He rolls free, grabs another mount, maybe one of your kin, and rides again. You are left to panic, to bleed, to trample in place until your legs give out and you collapse under the weight of your own body. If you live through it, they patch you up with rope and rags and send you out again. No rest, no healing, just another fight, another load, another death you have to run beside. And if you die, you are part of the pile. One more mound of torn leather and stiff limbs baking in the sun after the trumpets have stopped and the stories are already being told. But none of those stories include you, because horses don't get glory, they get used and forgotten. You don't speak, you don't cry, you don't have words for agony, but you feel it. And that's the 12th brutal truth. Your pain is invisible to everyone but you, and they don't care unless it slows you down. Your body tells the truth, but they've stopped listening. You limp, just slightly, favouring the back leg. No one notices. Or maybe they do, and just tighten the harness. You wince when the saddle comes down too hard. They mutter that you're being difficult. You twitch when they brush a sore patch raw. They slap your flank and call it nerves. Your gums bleed from the bit. Your hooves are hot, tender. Maybe a stone is lodged in one, but you keep walking, because if you stop, you'll be beaten. You don't whimper, you can't sob, you just keep going. And that's the danger. Because to them, a quiet horse is a fine horse. A horse that moves is a healthy one. They don't see the cracked tooth, the sprained tendon, the shallow breathing from a lung bruised in yesterday's fall. Pain lives inside you, and there's no one to tell. Sometimes the signs are obvious. You refuse food. You shy from the reins. You lean against the wall when you think no one's watching. That's when they start to wonder, but not with concern, with suspicion. A sick horse is a liability. A lazy horse is worse. They won't risk feeding you if they think you're at the end. So they test you, make you trot, pull something heavier, work longer. If you can survive that, then you're fine. If you can't, then maybe it's time. Time to sell. Time to slaughter. Time to walk you out into the woods and leave you where no one will hear your knees buckle or see the birds circle 3 days later. And through it all, the worst part is the silence. Not yours, theirs. Because they see your ribs showing. They see you flinch when the bridle touches bone. They see the blood on your fetlock. But as long as you can still walk, they pretend they don't. And you learn to hide pain like it's shame. Because in their eyes, if you show it, you stop being worth keeping. Your fear isn't a weakness to them, it's a tool. That's the 14th brutal truth. Your terror is weaponized. You don't charge into battle because you're bold. You do it because you're frightened. You're spurred forward through fire, through noise, through screams, and men use that fear like reins. They count on it. Your wide eyes, your heaving chest, your pounding hooves. They intimidate. A stampede of flesh and noise, a wave of panic meant to break the line, but they never stop to think. You're panicking too. You don't know what's beneath your hooves. Sometimes it's grass, sometimes mud, sometimes men, screaming, slipping, trying to escape while you're forced to move forward, even as your own legs tremble. Your size is power, but it isn't yours. It's fear forced into motion. Even off the battlefield, your presence is meant to scare. The tax collector rides you so villagers look up, literally. The knight sits tall to show who's above who. You're dressed in iron, draped in flags, your head forced high by sharp bits, eyes made to glare. They think you look proud. You feel pain. The truth is, you're just trying not to fall over under the weight of steel and leather and noise. Your ears twitch at every shout. Your ribs tense with every tug. You flinch with every step, waiting for something to go wrong. And still they parade you, through crowds, through fires, through drums and smoke and blaring horns meant to drive fear into others, while you, already afraid, keep going. Not because you're brave, because you're trained, because you're too scared not to obey. They say you're noble, but nobility doesn't mean calm. It means silence under pressure, terror with no choice but forward. And in the end, your fear doesn't earn you mercy. It just makes you more effective. There's no pasture waiting at the end of your life. No soft retirement, no hand stroking your muzzle beneath a warm sunset. That's the 15th brutal truth. You don't grow old. You're worked until something breaks. Then you're sold. Or worse, your whole life is labor. From the day you're broken in to the day your back can't carry weight, your legs can't stop trembling, your breath rattles with every step. You serve. And when you can't, no one thanks you. No one keeps you around just because. A farmer with no harvest can't feed a mouth that doesn't pull. A merchant with no coin won't house something that doesn't earn. So they lie. They say you're fine, just tired, still strong. And they walk you to the market one more time. You know the place. You've been there before. But now you stand differently. Your coat is dull, your step uneven. You don't raise your head. You don't flinch. You just wait. Buyers check your teeth, feel your knees. Some shake their heads. You're too old, too slow, too used up. They say it like you're a spoiled tool, not something that survived 10 winters, 5 owners and a war you never chose. The ones who do buy, they don't plan to ride you, they plan to use you. One last season of ploughing, one more trip to the next town, one more cartload, one more haul. Then they'll stop feeding you as much. not out of cruelty, just efficiency. You'll lose weight, grow stiff, breathe slower, and eventually you'll fall. When you do, it won't be dramatic. You'll stumble trying to stand. Knees buckle, hooves slide in mud. You'll lie there breathing hard, waiting for someone to lift you. They won't. Not unless they can still get something from your hide, your bones, your meat. And then, you're gone. Not remembered, not mourned, just replaced. A younger horse, a stronger one who doesn't limp yet. They'll use the same harness, the same name maybe. And by nightfall, it'll be like you never lived. Because in the Middle Ages, you don't grow old, you grow unprofitable, and then you disappear. There's no old age for you, no pasture, no peaceful retirement, no gentle end beneath the sun. Only work until you break. And when you break, you vanish. That's the 16th brutal truth. You die long before your time, and no one calls it tragic. You were built to live 25, maybe 30 years, but in the Middle Ages, you're lucky to see 12. Some die younger, a stumble on the road, a shattered leg, a fever, a bite that festers. Others are ridden too hard in battle, pulled too far through mud, left too long in snow, forgotten after a bad fall, and when your body starts to slow, when your step becomes uneven, when your breath shortens on hills, when your ears sag and your appetite fades, they don't think of rest, they think of replacement. The cart you pulled yesterday will be pulled by a younger horse tomorrow, one with straighter legs, a fuller chest, a quicker startle, and you'll be sold. If you're strong enough to stand, maybe to a poorer farmer, maybe to someone who just needs a few more miles out of you. You'll walk a little farther, work a little slower, collapse in a different field. If not, then you'll meet, not always, but often enough, especially when times are hard. Your hide might be stripped, your hooves boiled, your bones crushed for glue. You won't know, of course. You'll just feel the rope tighten one final time and the blade draw near without kindness. There is no mourning, no soft hand brushing your mane one last time, just the sound of another stable gate opening, another foal being tied, another saddle being cinched. The cycle continues, and you, who carried lives, hauled goods, bore kings, fled war, broke roads with your hooves, are no more than a forgotten shape in the mud. Because horses in the Middle Ages don't grow old, they disappear. The bridge collapsed because it was rotten, the wagon tipped because it was overloaded. The journey failed because the man didn't bring enough water, enough feed, enough sense to check the weather. But who gets blamed? You. That's the 17th brutal truth. When something goes wrong, it's never their fault, it's yours. You slip on ice because no one cleared the path, and the whip falls across your back. You stumble over a hole because no one mended the road, and they call you clumsy. You stop at the edge of a broken bridge, unwilling to fall into the current below, and they beat you for being stubborn, for disobeying, for thinking, because thinking isn't what they want from you. They want blind movement, predictable obedience, a body that doesn't question pain or danger or death. And when something goes wrong, someone has to answer for it. But they won't blame each other, won't blame themselves. So they blame the horse. You've seen it before. The mare who refused to move after her foal died. The stallion who spooked at a torch and shattered a cart. The gelding who bolted at the sound of thunder and dragged his rider into a tree. All punished, beaten, sold, put down, because no one asked. What frightened them? What failed them? They only asked, what did the horse do wrong? And in that world there's no such thing as an honest mistake, only consequences. So you learn not to flinch, even when you hear thunder. You learn not to hesitate, even when your body screams no. Because in the Middle Ages, you are not allowed instincts. You are only allowed blame, and it follows you everywhere. Even when you're the only one who tried to do the right thing, there's no middle ground for you. You're either priceless, guarded, overworked, pushed to the brink because they can't afford to lose you, or you're nothing, forgotten, unfed, unshod, unnamed. That's the 18th brutal truth. A medieval horse is either everything or less than nothing. If you're a knight's warhorse, you wear armor heavier than your own bones. You're paraded in front of lords, given wine to drink before battle, polished and praised, but not because you're loved, because you're useful. They talk about you like gold. You're worth a small house, maybe two. They feed you before the servants, stable you in stone stalls while the peasants sleep in huts. But when you go lame, just once, your value drops like a stone. Suddenly, the oak bags stop coming. The grooms avoid your stall. The talk changes. Might be time to sell him off. If you're not a destrier, you're a workhorse, and your value is measured in labour. Can you pull 2 carts instead of 1? Good. Work longer. Can you manage the hills without breaking stride? Great. You'll be sent every day. You're treated well, but only until the day you cost more than you give. And if you're a peasant's horse, you're both treasure and trap. You're the only thing between them and starvation. And yet, you'll go hungry if they do. Your death could ruin them, but they'll still work you to the bone because they have no choice. They love you, maybe, but they love survival more. And if you're a failed foal, a bad stepper, a horse too small or too slow or born with the wrong gait, then you're nothing. You don't even earn a name. Just a rope around your neck, a shove toward the trader, or the field, or the butcher. You are only valuable when you give more than you need, and the moment that balance tips, no one remembers your worth, only your weight. No war, no famine, no plague, just a quiet season, a warm sun, a still field, and still, you're not safe. That's the 19th brutal truth. Peace doesn't protect you, it just changes how you're used. In war, you carry knights. In famine, you pull carts of grain. In plague, you haul bodies. But in peace, you become everything else. The plough, the cart, the ride, the fuel for every quiet burden no one else wants to carry. You're worked harder because there's no excuse not to. No battle to die in. No disease to fear. Just long, endless labour from dawn to dusk. You carry water to homes too far from rivers. You pull wagons for merchants who count every mile in your blood. You haul stone for churches you'll never enter. Timber for homes you'll never shelter in. They load you with the weight of civilization, brick by brick. And when winter comes, you don't rest. You walk through snowdrifts up to your chest, hooves cracking ice, belly empty. You slip on frozen mud and get up without complaint. No one thanks you. No one sees you. You're part of the background now, a silent figure always moving. And the worst part, peace makes your suffering quieter. There's no drama, no scars, just the slow grind of years that wear your body down until one day you stop moving, and no one can say when the damage was done, because it was all of it, every step, every season. Every day they told themselves, just one more task, he can take it. And you did, until you couldn't. And even then, they don't stop. They just find another. Because peace doesn't mean protection, not for you. You gave everything, your body, your strength, your silence. But when the end comes, there's no ceremony, no kindness, just the quiet. That's the final, brutal truth. When a horse dies in the Middle Ages, the world does not stop. Not even for a moment. You collapse in a field, legs folded wrong, lungs stretched thin. You've pulled your last cart, marched your last mile, fought your last fear. Maybe someone is there, maybe not. If they are, they don't weep. They check your eyes, your breath, your value. Then they decide what's next. If you're lucky, you're buried, a shallow pit covered in stones. Maybe a boy leaves a tuft of mane tied to a stick. If not, you're left where you fell, The birds come, the flies, the wolves if the forest is close enough. They pick you clean. Within days there's nothing left but hooves and a shadow in the grass. No one writes your name, no one tells your story. You've carried lords, fed families, built villages, lost battles. You've done what no one else could, and none of it is remembered. Not because they're cruel, but because that's the way it's always been. Horses are born into silence. They die in silence. And in between, they work until their hearts fail, until their knees shatter, until their backs bow so deeply they can't stand up again. And even then the plough must move, the trade must run, the war must march. So someone else is saddled, hitched, beaten, named, and the world moves forward on a spine that once belonged to you. And that's the end. 20 brutal reasons why being a horse in the Middle Ages was anything but noble. Not the stuff of paintings or legends, just quiet, constant suffering hidden behind armour and silence. If this story helped you see the past from a different angle, or gave you a moment of stillness to wind down your day, feel free to like the video and subscribe. And if you're still listening, let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? It's always comforting to see how far these quiet stories travel. So rest easy tonight, breathe deep, you've reached the end,